Greetings fellow Decepticons, SoundBlaster1987 here. I'm not wearing my usual hoodies or anything because it's really warm when I'm recording this, due to the 2022 heat waves in my current location. So, today's vlog for August of 2022 will be detailing all of the secondary or sidekick Kamen Riders from the Kamen Rider franchise in Japan. For those who don't know, a secondary rider may not always be chronologically the second rider character to be revealed in the series, but they are the main sort of partner sidekick to the main rider, sort of a Luigi to their Mario in a way. So, the original Kamen Rider sidekick, the first secondary rider, goes all the way back to the 1971 original series with Kamen Rider Nego, the second cyborg superhero that used to be an experiment by the Shocker terrorist group and then turned against them, just like Takeshi Hongo, the original Ichigo Kamen Rider, did. Nego doesn't quite count though, because although he did team up with Ichigo during his own show, Nego then followed on with his own spin-off series later on. Then another secondary rider that ended up becoming the main rider of their own show the season after was Rider Manager in the Kamen Rider V3 series. Unlike the other Kamen Riders, he doesn't exactly henshin properly by transforming, he just puts on a bug-themed helmet and some gloves. So, he was the sidekick of Kamen Rider V3 in the early 70s and then got his own show a little while later on. Then, the secondary rider idea would be dropped for a couple of years and then we would obviously get the Amazon exclusive Kamen Rider Amazon reboot, which will feature more riders, but I'll go into that in detail more in another vlog down the line. Next, we have the first female Kamen Rider and the first female secondary rider with Tackle, the sidekick of Kamen Rider Stronger. Stronger, for those who don't know, is TJ Omega's favourite Showa era Kamen Rider series and or favourite Kamen Rider character from that era. Link in the description below for one of TJ's videos about those characters. Then, I suppose the android Shadow Moon from the Kamen Rider Black and Black RX series could technically be counted as a secondary rider for a while, but then he got corrupted by a programming glitch and turned evil. So he became one of Kamen Rider Black RX's main villains as well. And he was also one of the villains of the Sentai Kamen Rider crossover movies for a while. Then, with the end of the Showa era comes the start of the Heisei era. Kamen Rider Kuga was the only rider at all in his series, so we had to go to Agito for our first Heisei era secondary rider. Although the official list of secondary riders on the Kamen Rider Wiki states that G3, or G3X as he was later known, the police agent wearing a Kamen Rider suit, was supposed to be the secondary rider. I prefer to think of it as Kamen Rider Gills being the secondary rider and G3 or G3X being the sort of pretend Kamen Rider sort of government add-on ally that was tacked on to the end of the show for plot reasons. Again, Agito is TJ Omega's favourite Heisei era Kamen Rider series, or at least for the Phase 1 Heisei anyway. Then moving on to Kamen Rider Ryugen, or its American adaptation Dragon Knight, we have Kamen Rider Knight with the bat motif, or Wing Knight in the American series. He started out as more of a darker anti-hero sort of rival to the Ryuki character and then eventually mellowed out and became the secondary sidekick character. There were a lot of riders in the Ryuki series, but most of them turned evil at one point or another through one thing or another. Then, moving on, we have all the Kamen Riders of the Phi series, which are based on the Greek alphabet letters, specifically Phi and Chi, Kappa, Omega, and that kind of thing. Kamen Rider Kaixa, that's K-A-I-X-A, for those who don't know how to spell it properly. Based on the Greek letter Chi, he was the secondary rider, along with Kamen Rider Delta. Then we have Kamen Rider Blade, and his secondary rider, again, is somewhat debatable. The official secondary riders list on the Wiki states that Garen is the secondary rider of Kamen Rider Blade, though I prefer to think that Chalice is more of a suitable fit for that role. Then, with Kamen Rider Hibiki being secondary rider sidekick for that series was Kamen Rider Ibuki. Again, a lot of riders, some of them are evil in that series, it's very confusing stuff. Now for the first Kamen Rider series I've actually watched a bit of, with Kamen Rider Kabuto. Granted, I've only seen episode 1 at the start of this, at the time of this recording, but as far as I'm aware, Kamen Rider Gatack, the blue stag beetle Kamen Rider, is the primary sidekick, although it does seem to shift back and forth for plot reasons between Gatack, TheBee and Sasword as their secondary rider. I'll leave a link in the description to my Souchaku Henshin figure review for those 3 riders. Then for Kamen Rider Deno, of course, the green bullhorn shaped Kamen Rider Zeronos, who was possessed by an imagined demon called Deneb, was the secondary rider sidekick, who, due to his zero form, also turned evil at one point but got redeemed. After that was Kamen Rider Kiva, a series that I'm about a third of the way through watching at the moment. This is an interesting one because, again, we've technically got a female secondary rider, but at the same time, their name Kamen Rider Ixa goes back and forth between 2 individual users of the same belt, between a man and a woman in the series. It gets confusing after a while, trust me, just go with it. But, again, they don't trust Kiva at first due to his Fangai-related powers origins, so it takes them a while to warm up to working alongside Kiva against the rest of the Fangai. And then, towards the end of the series and in some of the later movies, Kiva's father becomes Kamen Rider Dark Kiva, but uses the power for more heroic purposes as a sort of secondary rider type situation. I'll leave a link in the description below for more information on that later. Finally, at the end of the first phase of the Heisei era, we had Kamen Rider Decade, the 10th anniversary season. Unfortunately, Kamen Rider D-End acts more like a, anti-hero rival type than the traditional secondary rider sidekick, working more alongside Shocker and the other villains when actually with Decade. He was actually more the pilot of the Shocker Megazord and the Go Kaiju crossover movie. Unfortunately, D-End is definitely a lot darker character than he should be for a Kamen Rider character. So, with the exception of the Kamen Rider Axel movie, which features the yellow boost form, Kamen Rider Double is the only rider series to this point that I've actually watched all the way through, including the A to Z 26 Gaia Memories of Fate movie. So, as I mentioned, Kamen Rider Axel, the red motorcycle-themed rider, and his blue trial and yellow boost forms are the secondary rider for this series. It's a little bit weird, this one, because Kamen Rider Double is basically 2 people fusing together into one Kamen Rider suit. Because Philip transfers his sentience to his Gaia memory, which then teleports into Shotaro's version of the belt, allowing them both to combine their minds into Shotaro's body. So, as I mentioned, Kamen Rider Axel, aka Ryun Teryun, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, but basically he's a police detective that again starts as a darker anti-hero and a more ruthless one at that, and doesn't quite trust Double's motives for being a hero at this point. He does eventually warm up as the series progresses, and he does end up marrying Akiko at the end of the series. And he has a sort of motorcycle motif to his design, with a motorcycle handlebar shaped belt and the fact that he can transform into a motorcycle for Double to ride on. He also has a motorcycle engine shaped sword called the Engine Blade. But enough about that series, moving on to a series that I have also watched, Kamen Rider Os, which I'm currently 36 episodes into at the time of this recording. Kamen Rider Birth is the main secondary rider of this series, with Date Akira as the main host of the Kamen Rider Birth belt. Forgive me for not saying the secret identities of every secondary rider. I can't remember saying all of the Japanese names properly with these complex pronunciations and such like, so bear with me. But yes, unlike O's himself, who uses the core medals, Kamen Rider Birth uses cell medals to transform. He also uses cell metals as the power source of his weaponry, the claws system, which comes out of a gashapon capsule machine on his belt. These weapons can either combine onto his body as weapons, or they can transform and combine into a giant scorpion robot that he can control called Claws Sasori. And then all of the weapons from the scorpion robot can combine onto him all at once to form Kamen Rider Birthday mode. See what they did there? Because the company that hired Kamen Rider Birth, the CEO of that company is always listening to the Japanese version of Happy Birthday on the radio while icing cakes throughout the series. And he actually iced a cake saying Happy Birthday when the greed monsters were unleashed after 800 years of being sealed away. But that's a vlog for another time. Moving on, we have Kamen Rider Meteor from Kamen Rider Forza next. Meteor has the ability to upgrade with the Meteor Storm weapon power-up with his Meteor Storm Shaft, which has a, spinning top gimmick to the Astro Switch that comes off it and plugs into his belt. And then he is also able to combine with Kamen Rider Forza using the Fusion Switch. Being a space-themed series, Kamen Rider Meteor has got a very dark blue suit with star detailing all over him. Like his entire body is just a map of the galaxy kind of thing. And his head has also got spikes going up to one side like the tail of a comet. Hence the name Kamen Rider Meteor. Then, another secondary rider best known for his upgrade form is Beast from Kamen Rider Wizard, who has a lion-like motif and can use his ring like a key to open the buckle of his belt. He has an upgrade form called Hyper Beast, using another wizard ring. Being a lion-type character, he is somewhat more feral with his attacks and tends to be in crouching or quadrupedal poses on the battlefield half the time from what I've seen in promotional shots. I've not watched Wizard yet, but I will eventually. Moving on from Kamen Rider Wizard to another Kamen Rider series that I've actually watched part of, Kamen Rider Guy. The secondary rider list on the Wiki states that Kamen Rider Baron is supposed to be the secondary rider of this series, but yet again he's more of a darker, grittier anti-hero slash rival type. Seeing as how Baron is the leader of a rival breakdancing group from the Kamen Rider Guy character. So although he turned evil toward the end of the show, I am going to personally choose Kamen Rider Ryugen to be the official representation for secondary rider in this series. Kamen Rider Ryugen, in his great armor form, is one of the figures that I've reviewed on my channel in the past, link in the description below. Then moving on from Kamen Rider Guy was Kamen Rider Drive, with Kamen Rider Mac, the motorcycle-themed rider, being the secondary sidekick hero of the series. Being motorcycle-themed instead of car-themed, he uses signal bikes on his belt instead of the usual shift cars that the Kamen Rider Drive characters normally use, with a secondary wrist brace thing for the cars to be attached to, in addition to the ignition switch on the belt buckle. Then following on from Drive was Kamen Rider Ghost. And in Ghost, Kamen Rider Spectre was the secondary rider, using the same belt type as Kamen Rider Ghost, but with mostly blue icons like Tutankhamun. Then following on from Ghost was Kamen Rider X-Aid in, I want to say 2017 or so. And his secondary rider sidekick was a character called Kamen Rider Brave, who was based on a Medieval Knight video game, because their thread motif was video game cartridges called gashats from Japanese arcade machines. So Kamen Rider Brave is a somewhat Medieval Knight inspired secondary hero, not to be confused with Bravo, the durian armor themed villain from Kamen Rider Guy, who I've already reviewed the figure art of. Watch your fingers on that thing, by the way, super spiky. Next, Kamen Rider Build from 2019, and we finally have a Kamen Rider with actually less transformation power using the same device type as the main rider, because unlike Kamen Rider Build, who uses one pair of full bottles, as in, you know, rabbit and tank or hawk and gatling gun kind of thing, Kamen Rider Cross Z only uses one full bottle at a time, Dragon specifically. He's another one with an upgrade form. If he puts the Dragon full bottle into the Magma Knuckle and then attaches that to his belt, he becomes Kamen Rider Cross Z Magma Dragon, the most powerful Kamen Rider form in terms of its design that I've seen so far. Or at least the most impressive anyway. Then, for the end of the Heisei era, we had Kamen Rider ZO, the Time Travel 20th Anniversary series from 2020, around or 2019, around that time. Toward the end of the, pre-COVID pandemic era. Again, Kamen Rider Gates from the, ZO series was more of a darker, sort of Knuckles v Echidna type anti-hero, rival to ZO at the start of it, trying to assassinate ZO's past self so he wouldn't become the ruthless dictator villain Oma ZO that rules the future in the year 2068. Although, of course, Gates' story was expanded upon during the COVID pandemic with Kamen Rider ZO Next Time Gates Majesty, the movie. Then, for the COVID pandemic era, we have the Reiwa era in Japan with Kamen Rider 01. This series actually has two secondary riders in equal capacity, one male, one female. The two equal secondary riders of Kamen Rider 01 were called Kamen Rider Vulcan, who uses the Shooting Wolf Progrise Key, and the female rider was Kamen Rider Valkyrie using the Russian Cheetah Progrise Key. Of course, like 01 himself, both of them have the ability to use different Progrise keys in their Shot Riser gun-shaped belt buckle to become different forms, such as Lightning Hornet, Sting Scorpion, and so forth. I haven't actually watched 01 outside of a few transformation videos on YouTube, but I will watch it eventually because I've heard a lot of good things about it from people like TJ Omega. Then, Kamen Rider Sabre in 2021, the second most recent of the Kamen Rider series from the Reiwa era. Kamen Rider Sabre has not been very well received by most fans on this side of the world, I have to say. But for the secondary rider, we have Kamen Rider Blades, the blue rider, whose cooler blue colours contrast pretty well with the fiery red tones of Sabre himself, given that Sabre's main storybook transformation device was based on the Medieval Dragon storyline. Finally, for the current era, we have Kamen Rider Revis from 2021/2022. Now, because of Kamen Rider Revis being two separate individual riders together in one series, which to be honest is the way that Double should have done it, but the secondary rider for this series was called Kamen Rider Live, apparently, although Live was possessed by the spider-themed Kamen Rider Evil at one point. And that pretty much concludes things. We don't know much about the new Kamen Rider Geats series that's coming up in 2022 to 23, so I'll make a separate vlog about that series when it comes out. That's been my secondary rider review for 2022. I have been SoundBlaster1987. Join me next time in September for my vlog about the complicated and controversial relationship between Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, going all the way back to the Batman animated series episode Harley and Ivy, and continuing all the way along to season 3 of the Harley Quinn animated series of 2019, which at this point is still ongoing. My next review will be the Hunt for the Decepticons Deluxe Class Bludgeon figure from the Masters of Metallicato 2-pack. I don't own Whirl, I just bought Bludgeon loose on eBay. Till then, till all are one.